The sound of tires screeching caught my attention as I pulled into the pharmacy car park, where a sleek black SUV had just veered into the sole disabled parking space. With a hint of irritation, I watched as a well-dressed woman alighted, displaying no apparent mobility challenges, nor was there any sign of a placard on her mirror. Just what I needed after my tiring physical therapy session. I drove my van into a regular spot instead, meaning I'd need to walk and limp, nearly double the distance, struggling to properly secure my prosthetic leg. Observing the scene, the woman was embroiled in a dispute with pharmacy staff over her parking choice. Her voice carried sharply across the lot, a mix of impatience and entitlement. "I have every right to park here," she asserted, waving her perfectly manicured hands. I sighed deeply and thought it wise to at least try speaking with her. Perhaps she was simply unaware. As I approached, leaning slightly on my cane for support, I could see her more distinctly now. Designer sunglasses perched atop her head, a yoga mat under her arm, an air of utter indignation about her. "Pardon me, madam," I began softly. "I don't intend to intrude, but that space is reserved for those with disabilities. You appear to lack a placard, and I genuinely need this spot today." I gestured to my prosthetic in hopes of quickly resolving the matter. However, her response was unexpected. Her face turned rigid with anger as she faced me. "How dare you assume I'm not disabled? Not all disabilities are visible," she retorted. "I have just as much right to the space as you do with your leg thing. More actually, since I arrived first." Before I could answer, she stormed towards the pharmacy entrance, leaving behind a small crowd and at least 2 people recording the incident. Splendid, exactly what I needed to risk becoming a viral sensation. For the past 3 years, living in Oak Ridge Estates had generally been quiet despite our neighborhood's infamously stringent homeowners association rules. As a retired Army veteran, I preferred solitude, focusing on recovery and steering clear of any conflict. The shift to civilian life was challenging enough without neighborhood skirmishes. Most neighbors respected my privacy, yet Karen Westfield, the HOA president, seemed to regard my veteran status with suspicion. If not, Karen had been emphatic during our limited discussions that she opposed any special treatment, even for those who had served. Last year, when I requested a small ramp for my porch, she initially resisted, citing aesthetic concerns, until another board member discreetly warned her that denying reasonable accommodations might breach federal law. She approved the ramp the following day but remained cool towards me thereafter. Now here she was, the same Karen Westfield, occupying a disabled space illegally, yoga mat in tow, a situation not entirely lacking in irony. After our initial confrontation, I opted to address her once more, catching up near the pharmacy entrance. "Mrs. Westfield, I genuinely need that parking space. My prosthetic is troubling me today following therapy, and walking from the regular spots is arduous." I kept my tone calm and measured, reminiscent of handling tense situations overseas. Her expression hardened as she recognized me. "Oh, it's you, the veteran who imagines the rules don't apply to him," she blurted defiantly. "I have my own medical issues that justify this spot. Just because your disability is visible doesn't render it more valid than mine." "I understand, madam," I replied, striving to hold my composure, "but the law requires a placard or special license plate. Do you possess either?" She merely stated she had left her placard. Disdain. At home, she adjusted her designer handbag with a sharp snap. "I don't appreciate being interrogated in a car park by someone who already receives excessive attention in our community," she proclaimed. By now, a small crowd had gathered. A young woman approached cautiously. "I've been recording this," she mentioned softly. "Just so you're aware, this doesn't seem fair." Karen's eyes widened in outrage. "Recording me? That's a breach of privacy. I'll have you know I'm the president of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA, and I can make things quite uncomfortable for those who oppose me." She turned to me. "Don't think I'll forget this at the next board meeting when your garden modification request comes up." The store manager, a tall woman with a concerned expression, arrived. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, glancing between Karen and me. "This man is harassing me," Karen announced before I could respond. "He doubts my right to park in the disabled bay just because he can't see my disability. That's plain discrimination." The manager looked at me with an inquiring expression. I simply retrieved my officially issued disabled badge from my pocket and gestured to my prosthetic leg. "I served 3 tours in Afghanistan and lost my leg to an IED explosion on my last tour. I just need to collect my prescription, and parking in the disabled bay would make it easier today." The manager nodded sympathetically and turned to Karen. "Ma'am, do you have a valid disabled parking BA as I mentioned?" Karen replied, her patience feigned. I left it at home today. However, I have post-traumatic stress disorder from a car accident last year, and standing for long periods causes severe anxiety. I need that spot and I was here first. The manager appeared uncomfortable but remained firm. Without appropriate documentation, I'm afraid you'll need to move your vehicle. Those spaces are legally reserved. Karen's voice rose sharply. Are you siding with him simply because he's missing a limb? My condition is just as legitimate. I'll call the police if this harassment continues. That won't be necessary, said a new voice. We all turned as a police officer approached from a patrol car that had just arrived. Apparently, someone in the growing crowd had already called emergency services. Is there a problem with the parking space? Karen quickly recounted her version of events, her voice quivering with an affected victim tone. Officer, I'm being harassed for using a disabled parking space that I'm fully entitled to use. This man, she gestured accusingly at me, is trying to intimidate me simply because my disability isn't visible. The officer, whose name badge read Martinez, nodded patiently and turned to me. Sir, may I see your identification and badge, please? I handed them over quietly. Officer Martinez examined them attentively before returning them. Thank you, sir, and thank you for your service. He then addressed Karen. Ma'am, could I see your disabled parking documentation? I've explained several times, I left it at home today, Karen insisted, her voice rising in pitch. But I do have a legitimate disability. I suffer from PTSD and severe anxiety. Are you implying my disabilities aren't real just because they're not visible? No, ma'am, Officer Martinez replied evenly. But the law is clear. Without proper documentation displayed, you cannot legally use a designated disabled space, regardless of your condition. Dage. This is ridiculous. Do you know who I am? I'm the president of the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association. I know the law better than you and I am entitled to that space. Karen's face flushed a deep red as she pointed vehemently. As the crowd gathered, as I mentioned, Karen replied, her patience feigned, I left it at home today. However, I have post-traumatic stress disorder from a car accident last year, and standing for long periods causes severe anxiety. I need that spot and I was here first. The manager appeared uncomfortable but remained firm. Without appropriate documentation, I'm afraid you'll need to move your vehicle. Those spaces are legally reserved. Karen's voice rose sharply. Are you siding with him simply because he's missing a limb? My condition is just as legitimate. I'll call the police if this harassment continues. That won't be necessary, said a new voice. We all turned as a police officer approached from a patrol car that had just arrived. Apparently, someone in the growing crowd had already called emergency services. Is there a problem with the parking space? Karen quickly recounted her version of events, her voice quivering with an affected victim tone. Officer, I'm being harassed for using a disabled parking space that I'm fully entitled to use. This man, she gestured accusingly at me, is trying to intimidate me simply because my disability isn't visible. The officer, whose name badge read Martinez, nodded patiently and turned to me. Sir, may I see your identification and badge, please? I handed them over quietly. Officer Martinez examined them attentively before returning them. Thank you, sir, and thank you for your service. He then addressed Karen. Ma'am, could I see your disabled parking documentation? I've explained several times, I left it at home today, Karen insisted, her voice rising in pitch. But I do have a legitimate disability. I suffer from PTSD and severe anxiety. Are you implying my disabilities aren't real just because they're not visible? No, ma'am, Officer Martinez replied evenly. But the law is clear. Without proper documentation displayed, you cannot legally use a designated disabled space, regardless of your condition. Ed, a young man, approached the officer. I've got footage of this woman leaving her yoga class at Mindful Movement Studio just 20 minutes ago, he said. She was carrying the same mat and looked perfectly fine. She was actually jogging to her car. Officer Martinez raised an eyebrow. Would you mind showing me the video? He responded. The young man handed over his phone, and as Officer Martinez watched, Karen tried to interrupt, but he gestured for silence. Although I couldn't see the screen, Karen's flustered expression revealed everything. Her initial confidence had morphed into uneasy anger. That's irrelevant. I have good days and bad days, she insisted, and yoga helps my condition. It's doctor recommended. Officer Martinez gave the phone back. Based on what I've observed, I'll have to issue you a citation for parking in a disabled space without proper authorization, he said calmly. That incurs a 300-pound fine in this county. Karen's protest waned, despite her bravado hints at connections with the district attorney. Just then, another patrol car arrived, deepening the situation beyond my initial request for her to move her vehicle. Officer Martinez remained unfazed by her threats. "Your behavior is verging on disorderly conduct. Please move your car and lower your voice." I refused to be silenced. Karen's voice grew louder, claiming discrimination and harassment, threatening legal action against the pharmacy, myself as a veteran, and even the police department. Her finger jabbed towards Officer Martinez's chest, which was the final straw. "Ma'am, please place your hands behind your back," he ordered firmly. "You're under arrest for disorderly conduct and assaulting a police officer." "This is absurd." Karen shrieked as the officer gently took her arm. "My husband will take your badge for this." Despite her protests, Officer Martinez calmly handcuffed her, reciting her rights. The crowd watched silently as Karen, still shouting, was escorted to the patrol car, claiming victimhood. Once Karen was secured, Officer Martinez returned to collect statements. I provided mine simply and factually. After finishing, he thanked me for my service. "You can use the parking space now, sir," he said with a slight smile. "Apologies for today's inconvenience." I nodded gratefully, watching the patrol cars depart with Karen in the back, her indignant silhouette visible through the window. As the crowd dispersed, I finally headed to the pharmacy to collect my prescription. 3 days later, I received an official notice from the Oak Ridge Estates HOA board, announcing an emergency meeting concerning recent events involving board leadership. That evening my doorbell rang. Opening it, I found a young woman nervously standing on my porch. "Hello, I'm Sophie Westfield," she introduced hesitantly. "I'm Karen's daughter. I wanted to apologize for my mother's behavior at the pharmacy and since you've moved here." Handing me a letter with trembling hands, she continued, "Not everyone in our family shares her views. What she did was wrong and I'm so sorry." Touched by Sophie's sincere gesture, I accepted the envelope. "Thank you, Sophie. That's very kind of you," I replied. Karen had been sentenced to 40 hours of community service and fined over £1,000. Sophie remained silent and was promptly dismissed from the HOA board. Upon receiving the news this morning, she reacted by hurling a vase against the wall. When she eventually looked up at me, a faint, sorrowful smile appeared. "Perhaps this will be the wake-up call she needs," she murmured. I simply nodded, unsure of how to respond as Sophie turned and departed, her posture erect despite the burden clearly weighing on her. The letter felt unusually heavy within my grasp, far surpassing the significance of its contents.